Hey, how we doing, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Roundtable. We've got two just amazing guys in the Bulls community. We got Ricky O with us tonight and Zachary Draves, and we got a lot to talk about. How you guys doing, man?
Good, man. What a day for the
Good.
Bulls. The house cleaning is official. Billy Donovan is out. So we got some stuff to talk about. You guys reached out to Zach and I
Mm-hmm.
a week ago, maybe, to talk about this. And I feel like we got some great timing. Like, we actually got the news we were waiting for. The Bulls will need to hire a coach in addition to a new vice president of basketball operations, or whatever we're calling the GM these days. So, good timing on your part.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. That's what we were talking about before the stream. Like we wanted to reach out to you. I mean, I reached out to you like back in, I think right when March Madness started, and you were like, "Hey, man, I'm already in." I think you said you were in Indiana doing the Final Four, and I was like, "All right." I told Juan, I can't wait till he gets back, and it just seemed like the right time. And then, of course, like it seemed like everything happened right when you got back home. Like they fired Akme, and then I reached out to Zach, and then I knew Zach had people close to the situation with Billy, and then sure enough, he gets fired today. So yeah, it's kind of crazy the timing, man.
I mean, are we sure? I mean, I know it said Billy stepped down. I know you said he got fired, but it's sort of. I guess you can use those interchangeably to a certain degree, but yeah. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought? I mean, I guess when looking at the grand scheme of things in retrospect, the signs were already there. And, it was just a matter of who would come out on top. Would it be Billy or would it be Reinsdorf in terms of who would have the final say? Because, there were all these rumblings about Michael Reinsdorf, that is the owner, was adamant about wanting to keep Billy on even after they cleaned out the front office. But turns out Billy was the smart one. So he got out at exactly the right time, and the search is on.
Absolutely.
Well, for anyone who watches the pod regularly, be ready for the dogs to be excited because there's a lot of big Bulls news today. So sure, the two German Shepherds will be making an appearance. But thank you, Ricky and Zach, for coming on. Two of my favorite writers. Really appreciate you guys. Zach, I always go over his Matas Buzelis piece. It was one of my favorite things I read this year. And then Ricky, I was just watching. He had a WGN appearance where he really emphasized how he still really didn't have a lot of faith in how things were going. But the Bulls did have a chance to right the ship, I would say, was kind of his general message with everything. And this is before Billy stepped down. So I do want to ask you guys before we get into the meat of, like, what are the Bulls going to do, which is the overarching question here. What do you guys sort of think of as, like, the legacy of Billy Donovan as the Chicago Bulls coach, sort of his tenure? Because, again, he was one of the longest tenure coaches in the NBA at this point, one of the longer tenure coaches in Bulls history. Obviously not a lot of playoff success, though they did have an appearance. And no matter what, I think Billy is obviously attached to Arturas Karnisovas because of their tenure. So just when you try to summarize Billy's time in Chicago, how do you kind of think of it? How do you sort of contextualize Billy's time here?
I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, underperforming, underwhelming. I mean, pick your superlative. I mean, pretty much everybody else has been saying the same thing. And to be clear, Billy Donovan is without question, a very talented coach, has a brilliant basketball mind, and has, certainly a Hall of Fame career, and he's earned it. And I think with the Bulls, it was just a matter of, he was a victim of circumstance. He was at the beset of an ownership that historically hasn't always wanted to switch things up or take a chance or be innovative. The Reinsdorf ownership has always been sort of stuck in their ways. And it got them success, certainly, with the dynasty run in the 90s. But you had the player caliber to be able to put that together, and a bunch of other things too. And I just think, Billy was, he had his run, he had his chance. And as you said, Michael, he took them to a playoff appearance. He did produce some great talent. I mean, Kobe White and Ayu Dosunmu in particular wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for someone of Billy Donovan's caliber and background in development and, those sort of particulars. So it's underwhelming. It's underperforming just on the whole. But that being said, Billy Donovan, you can't deny that, he has a brilliant basketball mind and he has a fame career to his name. That's something he can hang his hat on, and nobody can ever take that away from him.
Facts.
I guess the first thing I'm going to think about when I think about Billy is that he took over for Jim Boylan, and what a breath of fresh air he was coming out of the Jim Boylan era. Jim Boylan could not coach his way out of a paper bag, but Billy brought so much professionalism, both in terms of like his communication with the reporters and with the players, but also just with his X's and O's. And I'll think about his adaptability, how when the Bulls were led by DeMar DeRozan, they had a very mid-range heavy shot profile, and after they moved off DeMar, it totally changed. And Billy had the team playing as fast as anyone in the NBA. This year, they were number one in the shot profile stats. So they were taking shots from the most valuable parts of the floor, tons of rim attempts, a lot of threes, almost no mid-range shots this past season. So that's what I'll think about, that, this guy was pretty adaptable to the talent on his roster. I think without Billy Donovan, we're sitting here and saying the Bulls haven't had a good coach since Tibbs. But Billy Donovan was a good coach. However, at times, I think his coaching acumen worked against the Bulls' best interest. Billy was able to squeeze out a few extra wins every season.
Yes,
honestly,
that's
the Bulls
huge.
really need. They probably needed better lottery chances because the teams Arturas gave him just never had any sort of ceiling outside of that first team. After Lonzo went down, the Bulls were basically in a position where they needed to blow it up, but they were delusional. And Arturas didn't want to do it. Maybe ownership didn't want to do it. Maybe Billy didn't want to do it, which was one reason why I thought, even though Billy's a good coach, that they needed a clean break and they needed to just clean house, because the worst thing that could have happened was Billy staying as the head coach and being like, hey, I'm in my 60s now. I want to push for a playoff spot. I want to try to get back in the mix to play meaningful games. And then the new GM maybe evaluating the situation and being like, man, we're far away. Like, we can't do any more shortcuts. Just because it's been 9 straight years of trash for the Bulls doesn't mean we need to hit the accelerator. If anything, it's proof that the Bulls need to take their medicine, because instead, the last few years, they've been delusional. They've been like, all right, we're going to push for the 8 seed. We're going to try to do everything we can to get the 8 seed. Then you fall flat on that, set
repeatedly
low goals and still fall short of expectations. That is a staple of the Jerry Reinsdorf franchise. And when that happens, I think everyone is disappointed and they want to accelerate it a little bit more. But shit, man, if you take a step back and just see where the Bulls roster is at right now, the roster stinks, and there's going to be just no chance that this is a quick fix. They have to be bad for the foreseeable future to do stuff like, I don't know, loan out your cap space and for, taking back bad contracts and getting an extra draft pick, or, play more young players instead of playing Colin Sexton 30 minutes a game.
Thank you, man. Preach.
Yes.
Preach.
I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't even know what the lottery rules are going to look like for next season with the NBA pushing tanking reform. But I do know that there's no moves the Bulls can make this season that will actually put them on a path towards being a championship contender in the short term. Like, they just need to do a 3-year rebuild. I think 3 years is probably a good number, which stinks because, we just feel like the last 6 years have been wasted anyway. It's like, what were we ever building towards? Nothing. So I guess that's sort of what I'll think about when I think about Billy Donovan. A good coach in a bad situation. Did he maybe put them in sort of a bad situation because he didn't want to tank? Maybe Arturas didn't want to tank. Maybe the Reinsdorfs didn't. But whatever, man. It's over now.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it, man. I think it was on this episode we had a couple weeks ago. I said he's like the good girl, bad time kind of a theme, man. Like, he's the right coach. It's just we're not the right team, and it wasn't the right time to have a dude like that here. I feel like I've grown up watching Billy Donovan be our coach, because when he first got here, I was younger and just pissed off all the time. Like, this dude sucks. But then, like, you start to realize, like you said, he's just super articulate. He was always super transparent. Shout out to Chris, Kayla Hoops on Twitter, but he always says, like, with Billy Donovan, whether you agree with him or not, at least he was always able to articulate exactly why he makes the decisions that he makes. So we can like harp on about, oh, we didn't like what he did here, we didn't like what he did here. But after every game, he got up on that podium and he was very transparent about why he did the things that he did. So, and you put that in comparison with a dude like Arturis, where we ain't even got to speak on that. But I will miss his professionalism for sure. But yeah, man, I am ready for a new era. So best of luck to Billy. But it's time for a new era for sure.
Yeah, and I think just to put a bow on it on that, to answer my own question, I'm a glass half full guy. So when I think of Billy, I think of the fact that the Bulls had above average defenses for pretty much his entire tenure here into the very end. With rosters I was never thrilled with, having Nikola Vucevic on the back line. And then the other thing I think about is the guard play. Billy Donovan himself being a former NBA guard. You got Lonzo Ball, you got Kobe White, you got Ayo Dosunmu. Pretty much every guard that touched the Bulls roster throughout Billy's tenure at least had one sustained moment of success, if not a long tenure of success. So I think I just think about the good guard play you got with Billy Donovan, and then what Ricky mentioned, how he was pretty adaptable to the roster, despite people sort of thinking otherwise, I would say, in terms of Bulls fans at least. Ultimately, anyone who follows me knows I've been a huge Billy fan the entire time. But I'm pretty excited about the news as far as the Bulls' outlook, just because my entire thing was I respect Billy so much and think he was so articulate and think he was actually a pretty good scout of roster talent, college players himself, that I thought it would be a good move if he stepped into the front office. But I didn't want him doing a half-stepping move where he was trying to be the head coach, trying to have some power in the front office as well. I wanted it to be a clean break where he was clearly moving to the front office and having a hand in choosing a head coach, because of all people, I think Billy Donovan would actually be pretty good in terms of choosing a successor to run the Bulls in terms of head coaching candidates. But if Billy didn't want to step into the front office, I think at this point it's best for a clean break, because it seems a little odd to force him on a new front office. So ultimately, again, I'll just think of the guard play and feisty defense despite not being well equipped to do so. And ultimately, I think of Billy as a positive experience. Again, he kind of did the best, I think, with what he had to work with, which is the bottom line here. But kind of wanted to segue into the next thing here, which is I wanted Billy to step into the front office. This is an area I don't have a lot of expertise in. You kind of go off of what you see, what you hear. There are several names that have been thrown out for the Bulls front office openings here. I just wanted to hear from both of you guys. Is there anyone you think is a strong candidate? Is there anyone you really don't like that you've heard? Just because on the surface level, Matt Lloyd is a name I've heard a ton. I would be pleased with him just because he has a long connection to the Bulls, a long history with the franchise. I know that's something they trust, so I think they would give him an honest look. And I like, again, it's tough knowing exactly what he did in Minnesota, but based off of what Minnesota has done, I would think he has a pretty strong understanding of how to build a strong team. And then outside of Matt Lloyd, I don't think I've heard Mike Zarin actually mentioned as a candidate, and I don't think the Bulls would actually get him. But pretty much anyone that's connected to Boston Celtics and their success, I would be interested in taking a stab at the job. So just wanted to get a feel on what you guys think about the Bulls front office openings, if there's anyone you guys had in mind.
I think Matt Lloyd really does stand out of the bunch just because of the Bulls connection. And not only was he with the Bulls for close to 20 years, but he was the guy that was instrumental in the development of players like Derrick Rose. Now, granted, that was certainly a different time in the NBA, different era. And so he had a lot different circumstances to work with. And so, but his name really does stand out just because he knows the Bulls organization. He knows the ins and outs of it. He's tight, as far as I could tell, he's tight with John Paxson, and John Paxson's name has been thrown around lately during this whole search for a new GM, because he apparently will have a greater say, will be the ear in Reinsdorf's ear in terms of seeking out who those options were, or who those options are rather. But Matt Lloyd's name really does stand out just because of his pedigree. He's done it all from a scouting standpoint and just from a developmental standpoint. So I think that he would be a natural fit in that regard, just because he's familiar with the organization and he has the background and he has the receipts to prove it. So I just think, and certainly there's plenty other names that will eventually come down the pike, but for me, his name stands out for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think Matt Lloyd would be good based on what I know about him, but also, we have no idea. if Matt Lloyd would end up being a good GM. We just don't really have enough information to make an assessment of that right now. I think that it's going to be on the Reinsdorfs or, the search firm or John Paxson or whoever else is going to be involved in this process to like really tap into what his long-term plan would be if he takes the Bulls job. I would not be opposed with Matt Lloyd. I just don't know. And honestly, what I keep coming back to is Arturas seemed like a pretty good hire. They rated him from Denver's front office. He was the guy who found Jokic. He seemed to, be tightly tied to their success. And I don't think that hiring Arturas was the real disaster. I think it was just keeping him too long. Like, it became pretty clear when he went 3 years in a row without making a single trade that maybe this guy was a clown and that you had to move off him. So I think it's tough after the Arturas experience to just be like, well, just take a guy, a top assistant from a front office, from a team that's successful, and pick them, and maybe it can work out. And in a lot of cases, I do think that would be a good process. Like, just looking at the list that Shams reported, like, I think Dennis Lindsay, he basically built the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Utah Jazz teams that never broke through, but they were winning 50 games every year, making playoff runs. And since he's come to Detroit has been very successful. So I think he would be a good candidate. I would love to see the Bulls maybe throw their market size and their money around and try to get someone like Zach Kleinman from Memphis, who grew up in Lincoln Park in the city. And, the Grizzlies are like a small market Western Conference team. Like, building a championship level team is going to be way harder there than it is going to be in Chicago. So if the Bulls liked him, I think that would be a good name to go after. I know some Grizzlies fans are a bit fed up with Kleinman after the way that their last successful era petered out. But man, the guy got 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bane. He got a bunch of stuff for Jaren Jackson. So at least he is acting proactively instead of reactively like Arturas always was. And he's certainly not afraid to take big swings the way that Arturas was like just totally frozen, it seemed like, for multiple years at a time, not doing anything. So I think that could be cool. And then I've thrown out Daryl Morey before. And people have told me Daryl Morey sucks. He's lost his touch. That would be a terrible idea. But man, I just suffered through, late Eric Garpax and then Arturas. So I think Morey, if he becomes available for the Sixers are probably going to get swept. I know they're playing the Celtics right now as we record this. And he hasn't exactly done a great job in Philly, but I think he's got some extenuating circumstances with the Embiid situation. Signing Paul George to a max contract, not looking too good right about now, but I think like someone established like that would be worthy of an interview. And, the Bulls should be able to poach someone. They should be a marquee franchise. They're only they only seem like a mid-market franchise because that's the way the Reinsdorfs run them. So in terms of the list released, I liked that list. I think Matt Lloyd would be a good hire. I think Dennis Lindsay would be a good hire. Thank you, OG Bulls fan, for saying that it's 11 in the third. How about that? Can't believe that. So, yeah, I'm keeping an open mind about this process because I don't think we have any real insight into it.
Absolutely. And I do like the idea of Lindsay as well. Like you said, we don't have much to go off of, but it seems like success has followed him to his stops. I did want to bring up Austin Brown, the co-head of the basketball division at CAA. I saw he seemed to be a polarizing candidate to some people. Again, even though we don't know much, I guess some people have a certain feeling about agents making that step into NBA front offices. Without knowing too much about him on the surface level, I would be intrigued by that move just because Leon Rose has had a decent amount of success with the New York Knicks. I do think there's a lot of value in having those previous relationships that comes with being a powerful agent. So I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on Austin Brown if he was to be the choice.
I personally don't know too much about him to have an honest opinion about whether or not he would be a good choice. But what I will say, kind of going back to what Ricky said about Arturas, just to give him a little bit of leeway, because obviously in retrospect, it's easy to look back at him and say, oh, he was a terrible VP or GM or whatever you want to call his title in retrospect. But this was a guy who was in the front office at Denver, and not only did he bring on, Jokic and turn him into a supreme talent, but he also brought in Michael Malone as the head coach, and they won the championship in 2023. Only then for the following season for them to let him go when they were just on the cusp of the playoffs, which is neither here nor there. But I just think Michael Malone, maybe from a coaching standpoint, maybe he could be brought on or maybe considered. I saw his name being floated around across across different outlets, Yahoo Sports being one of them, and with him helping to turn a franchise around that won 30 games when he was brought on to winning a championship almost 10 years later, and producing some great talent. And you look at where the Nuggets are right now. And obviously they're in a tight series with the Timberwolves as we speak in the first round. But I think from a coaching standpoint, he would be a good consideration at the very least. But again, to Ricky's point, we can say we just don't know, or we can't predict that anyone will be good, bad, or indifferent until we see the product at hand, until we see something going. So it's anyone's guess at this point. But what I will say, and I wrote this in an editorial early this morning for Clutch Points, is that the possibilities are there, and if the Bulls were smart, they would take full advantage of it. And it can only be up from here if they make it that way. And if it works out, if they get the right person from the top down, if anything, they got Billy Donovan to thank them for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. What I'm thinking about is, remember Arturas's first offseason here? I think he did nothing.
Electric. Was it the second one?
Signed Garrett Temple. And whoever they hire now is going to have to step into the fire. Like, you got 2 top 15 picks. You're going to have to hire a head coach. You have a ton of cap space. You can't just roll over that cap space. You either need to sign free agents or make trades to take back guys with bigger contracts, maybe get some additional assets back. And it's going to be such an accelerated timeline. And you got to nail this first offseason. So we're going to get a pretty good read on whoever they hire. It's not going to be like Arturas was, where he was like paralyzed for his first 12 months and then his next, four of his next 5 years, basically. But whoever they hire has major work to do right away. So I do like the idea of someone who has already been working in the front office, because you're going to have to make 2 top 15 picks. So, Matt Lloyd or Dennis Lindsey, both of them should be pretty familiar with this draft class already, working for, other teams right now. And they better have a good idea of who they want to hire as a head coach too, because the coaching carousel is going to move pretty fast. I think the Warriors are likely to have an opening. So yeah, whoever the Bulls hire, got to step into the fire. You got to make a bunch of decisions real quick. And I think that Cowley said that, he expects the Bulls to have a GM or president of basketball operations around the time of the combine, which I think is like May 11th and 12th. I'll be there covering that. So that'll be fun. Always one of my favorite events to cover. But, by then we'll know the lottery is May 10th. So we'll know if the Bulls moved up in the lottery by that point. So yeah, all this is going to be happening real fast, and it's an important offseason to say the least.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, no, I was just going to piggyback off of something Ricky said about, just the style and the approach and the mindset of Arturas and the Reinsdorf ownership. There's this proverbial thinking that the Bulls are somehow this franchise that is just strapped for cash, or they're financially bankrupt, or they don't have money to spend. When the truth is they do have money to spend. They have all that cap space that's available to aggressively go after free agents and the like. They just chose not to do it. I mean, during this whole season, there have been all these rumblings about Giannis and Zion and Ja Morant and all these big-time players that were looking to be traded. And if the Bulls would take a chance at, signing them, or at least considering them. And then you had people say that the Bulls are, just not in good financial shape to be able to take a chance on those guys, because they're going to ask for a greater contract. They're going to, ask for more money and the like. But the truth is the Bulls do have money to spend. They just choose not to spend it. There's a difference between there's kind of a difference between bad owners and cheap owners. The Bulls historically have been cheap owners. They have a cheap ownership that chooses not to spend the money. And yeah, it is crunch time. They do have to find somebody in record time, and they do have to be aggressive in this offseason at every which way turn. And they do have to look into the free agent market. They do have to see who's there. They do have to, look and really think long and hard about who they want to keep and who they want to turn loose. I mean, if you ask me, you got to keep it. If you ask me, you keep a guy like Leonard Miller and you keep a guy like Rob Dillingham. They don't cost a whole lot. They've shown you what they can do, and you get rid of the Colin Sextons of the world because for much as on paper as good as he was, when he, especially toward that tailor end of the season, he just wasn't all he was cracked up to be. But you do keep a guy like Leonard Miller and you do keep a guy like Rob Dillingham that have shown you their talent and have been able to finally have the freedom to be able to just go out and play, which they weren't able to do in Minnesota. So you do have potential there. Top 15 draft picks, as was mentioned already. Just the potential is there. They just got to go for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you kind of segued into what I wanted to bring up, which was I saw, again, Abe, I think OG Bulls fan said talk
Abe's
free
killing
agents. He wanted us to bring up free agents. You kind of went into that. The Bulls obviously have a ton of cap space, so there's a ton of different ways they can go with what they want to do here. It's tough because I think they should focus so much on, again, rookies, sort of developing their young guys. I think they should mostly use their cap space to sort of take on back contracts and acquire draft picks. If they were to try to do anything you could even consider slightly splashy, I would try to maybe solve the center spot just because I do think this is a weak big man class. So if you could do something about that and restricted free agency especially, maybe not as big of a name as somebody like a Jalen Duren, but maybe going after a Robert Williams, assuming he's a player that Portland maybe doesn't try to retain, just someone who brings a defensive edge to the roster. I'm sure Isaiah Hartenstein will be a popular name, but again, with him having some playoff experience, I know a lot of contenders would probably look at him, but I would really be trying to go after a defensive big to shore up that back end. I am curious, again, with the Bulls having so much cap space to work with, what you guys think the new look front office should be focusing on in that regard.
Yeah, coming into this season, or during the season, I thought, hey, maybe try to go out, get Tari Eason, like someone like that. You could make a big offer with your restricted, in restricted free agency with your cap space. Try to get someone like him. Peyton Watson was another name I was thinking about. But at this point, it's almost like the Bulls are too far away to even go after those guys. Like Tari Eason has only been in the league a few years, but he's 24, and I think Peyton Watson's 23, I think, off the top of my head. So I'm not even sure if the restricted free agents fit the Bulls timeline, because that's how far away the Bulls timeline actually is.
Yeah.
I agree with what Mike said. Like, I think what is in their best interest is probably trying to take on toxic contracts and get some future assets back with them. But like, if the lottery odds really get flattened with tanking reform, are teams going to want to do that? Like, are the Raptors going to be like, oh yeah, here, you could take the next 4 years of Jakob Poeltl or however long is left on his deal, and we'll give you the 20th pick in the draft, which I think they have this year. Like, I don't know if Toronto's going to want to do that anymore, just because, they need more bites at the apple too, seeing how their first round series is going against Cleveland. So if the Bulls do something like that, I'm all about it. Even if it's a 2032 Toronto pick or something, like, yes, let's do it. Those are the type of moves that Arturas never really made. I guess outside of this marketing trade, which paid off, 5 years later, 6 years later, with this 15th overall pick. But yeah, it's tough to say. I do agree with Mike, though. They obviously need a center. Jalen Smith is kind of a center. He's probably better at the four. I'm tempted to say Jalen Smith is the best player on the team, or he was this past season. Like, he was really good. He's only 26. He's on a cheap deal. They should probably trade him because they're not going to be able to build a good team, while he's still in his prime. Like, I think they're far away. But that's a really good trade chip. I would say the same thing for Trey Jones. So, yeah, I like where Mike's head is at. They definitely need a center. Robert Williams is an interesting name because he is pretty good and would be flippable if he could ever stay healthy. He's taking threes against the Spurs. I'm like, what's Robert Williams taking threes here? I've never seen this before, watching him go back to Texas A&M. But Yeah, I like Mamu from the Raptors too, but he's another guy who I feel like, he's in his prime. Like, I don't know if he's really going to fit, exactly the Bulls' timeline. So I have an open mind in free agency, pretty much down for whatever. It's nice that whoever the Bulls hire will have all their future draft picks. The only bad contract on the books is Patrick Williams, who, normally $18 million a year for Patrick Williams for the next 3 years would be awful, but it's like, it still is awful, but it's also like the Bulls aren't doing anything with that cap space to like try to be competitive. So I think they just got to take their lumps, man. And I would expect a lot of losses the next few years, but you never know. The Reinsdorfs don't like to operate that way typically. They want that sweet, sweet gate cash. So I wouldn't be too surprised if, the next GM has to really advocate for himself and for his plan, which I don't know if Arturas ever had a plan. And if he did, he never advocated for it probably to ownership or to anyone else. So that is, I would say, the top objective of the new top basketball hire that the Bulls make. They need to be able to tell ownership that they are in charge and that whatever ownership wants to do, like Michael Reinsdorf's media availability. He's like, well, anyone who knows my father knows that he doesn't like to tank. It's like, well, yeah, no kidding. Your dad's 90 years old. So I get it. Also, like, you owe something to the fans. And the fans are still going to be Bulls fans, even if you make them sit through 9 straight years of trash, which is exactly what's happened the last 9 years. But we're all still here.
Yeah.
The United Center, I think, led the league in attendance again. It's the biggest gym in the NBA, so they have a little bit of an advantage there. But the attendance is great, as always. Bulls fans deserve better. They're such a dedicated, wonderful fan base.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be here through thick and thin. So no more shortcuts. You got to take your medicine, whatever that looks like in this new era of the NBA. And, I don't think there's going to be a quick fix.
Man, I love what you said there about we just got to take our medicine, man, because like I don't know if you've seen the timeline this season, man, but we've talked about it on multiple episodes. Like, this is probably one of the craziest seasons that I've witnessed as far as like the fan base and just like the vitriol of like amidst like, oh, we want the team to tank, or people who don't want the team to tank. So I'm right there with you though, man. I just feel like it's been a long time coming for us to like finally just take our medicine and realize it's okay to not be okay. We have not been good for a long time, but you got people who were just being delusional about it and saying that we're a lot closer than we were, which led us to making some pretty bad moves. But I feel like now we have no choice but to take our medicine, hopefully. But no, I hear you loud and clear, man. That's some good stuff.
Yeah, and the United Center is just the cornerstone of Chicago in so many different in so many ways. And the Bulls fans are very loyal. They're very dedicated. The only thing is that the Bulls are a franchise. I mean, every franchise does it to some degree or another, but the Bulls really do rely heavily on nostalgia to keep them going. There's a lot of throwbacks. There's a lot of, emphasis on the Bulls of yesteryear, certainly going back to the Jordan years. So the Bulls are kind of stuck in time, which is, very fitting for the Reinsdorf ownership. They're kind of stuck in time and refuse to adapt. At least to Ricky's point earlier about adaptability, you had Billy Donovan, who was willing to adapt to the way the game is played, whereas the Reinsdorfs historically have never been that way. And excellent at marketing. That's, as OG Bulls fans says, the Bulls are really great marketing franchise, one of the best, if not the best. But I agree, as far as free agents go, you do got to get a big man. You do got to get a guy who is really solid on defense, who can protect the paint, good at rim protection, someone who's aggressive, because, you look at who they had post Vooch, you had Nick Richards, you had Gershon. If I had to pick as far as a guy to keep, honestly, I wouldn't keep either one of them. But if I had to choose to keep one over the other, it would have to be Nick Richards. But you put him as a backup, you have him come off the bench, just because he's a little bit more aggressive. He protects the rim a little bit better. He can get up and down the floor, whereas Gershon can't really do that. And honestly, I think Gershon wants out of the NBA, at least from what I've been seeing and what I've read, or maybe he doesn't really want out of the NBA. I mean, take your pick, I guess, but he just doesn't strike me as the type of guy who would, stick around for the long haul, and certainly not a guy that you would build a team around. Zach Collins, I mean, yeah, he was injured for the entirety of the year, or at least a good 80% of the year he was injured. But when he's healthy, he was really good. And if anything, Zach Collins brought something to the game that Vooch didn't. He brought a fire. Yes. He brought a passion. He brought aggression. He was versatile. He could attack the rim. He could crowd the paint. I mean, he played with a certain fire that Vooch didn't. And if we're going to be honest, toward the first half of the season, by the time Vooch left to go to Boston, he was ready to be out anyway. I mean, he had said it himself that he was ready to get out of Chicago. But yeah, you got to go after a big man. You have the cap space to be able to do so. There's some great options there. Maybe Mitchell Robinson could be another one from the Knicks. Someone who can crowd the paint and is very defensive oriented. Jalen Duren, maybe, he's young, he can be a franchise player, great at protecting the paint and whatnot. So you do have options that are available, and that works to the Bulls' betterment. So we'll wait and see.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I like Zach Collins as well. Back when he was healthy and we still had Vooch on the team in Chicago here, I think I advocated for Collins to even start over him just because the numbers look pretty good at times with like Collins, Giddey, and Matas as a three-man unit, I think. He just put up a good fight defensively, but my whole thing with Collins is I'm just out on him because I think, again, we see it, the guy just can't stay healthy. If he's coming back on a decent deal, I don't think there's any problem with that. If there's like everyone's healthy and I have my pick of them, I definitely would rather have Zach Collins than Yabusele or Nick Richards for that matter. I like the archetype of Nick Richards, just not what he brings. I would like someone who was a little bit more offensive oriented while still bringing that shot blocking ability. But yeah, I do think big men is sort of where they should focus the bulk of their money if they're going to try to spend and not just go asset collecting. But something I want to move towards, we did talk about the front office, but obviously we started the episode talking about Billy Donovan stepping down. And something I get, being known as a little bit of a Billy Donovan defender, is things will be so much better once the Bulls have a new head coach. And the stupid phrase I always like saying is the chef is only good as his ingredients. So I think if we see the same roster, you're going to see a coach have the same struggles that Billy did. But the Bulls do have a chance to make a hire that changes the way the Bulls play, maybe connects with Giddey and Matas a little bit differently. So, of course, I was curious if you guys have any favorites or just any direction you think the Bulls should go in terms of coaching candidates. I wrote about this today for RoundtaBull, where I went over 6 names, guys who I think would be interesting. Pretty much my favorite candidate, and again, no one has really, I don't think, connected the Bulls to any names for sure yet, but Sam Cassell has been an excellent assistant coach for years and years now. Someone who was obviously a great point guard and player himself. I would be very interested to see how he aids Josh Giddey's development specifically. So I'd really be interested in Sam Cassell from Boston. And then outside of that, I would also be very interested in Chris Quinn. He's the associate head coach in Miami. Anyone that's worked under Eric Spoelstra for a long period of time, I think, has my attention. And I would be interested to see how he looks with his own team, given that he's also 38 years old, I believe. So I would like to see the Bulls go young if they could with head coach. But I was just interested to see if you guys had any idea in terms of names or just general direction that the Bulls should go in terms of their next head coach here.
Well, Michael, I like your suggestion of, Sam Cassell, just because he's been waiting in the wings for a head coaching job for such a long time. And anyone coming out of Boston is really, somebody to consider just because of where Boston is at. And another one that I came across that I think would be someone to consider would be Taylor Jenkins, maybe from Memphis. I mean, he was able to turn Memphis around, get them to, top seeds in the playoffs for a number of years and developing, the likes of John Morant when he was healthy, albeit. But I would consider somebody like that. As I mentioned earlier, Michael Malone would be someone to look at as well, just because he brings, experience in winning and development and working under Arturis, so he kind of knows how he rolls to a certain degree, even though Arturis is not going to be there, but there's a certain familiarity that's there. What's his name? Johnny Bryant, who's with the Cavs right now as an associate coach, and previously was an associate coach with the Knicks under Tom Thibodeau, no less. Tom Thibodeau, if you all remember him. I just think there's a lot of fish in the sea. They just got to go fishing and get the right catch. But there's some good picks out there. But I will say before we move on, I know some people. I'm sure you guys have seen it. I even wrote about it in my editorial that Steve Kerr's name was floated around as a potential. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. He's done his thing with Golden State. I think he's actually wanting to retire, maybe segue into front office, segue elsewhere. But I think, his time is done. He's going down as one of the greatest coaches of his era, without a doubt. 4 championships with the Warriors. The Warriors are going to go through a restructuring this offseason. You can expect that with who they got. So that's, I get it for sentimental purposes. That's why his name was floated around, but it's just not in the cards. But there's other options that they could choose from.
Mike, that's funny you bring up Sam Cassell, because when I recorded my Bulls podcast earlier today, which is Cash Considerations, I brought up Sam Cassell on that podcast. So I was like, why not? Sam Cassell, like, that'd be a cool ass hire, right? If nothing else, he's been around Missoula. So maybe he's got the maniac gene, and he's been around Brad Stevens, so he knows what a good organization looks like. So I'd be totally down with Sam Cassell. I think that'd be sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking if they hire Matt Lloyd, the Timberwolves have one of the probably most notable assistant coaches in the league, and that's Micah Nori. So if you hire a Timberwolves front office member to be your new president of basketball operations, you could hire a Timberwolves assistant coach as your new head coach, and Micah Nori, and he led Minnesota when Chris Finch had like knee surgery or something like that last year or 2 years ago. So I think that could be a good hire. Mike Malone, I will say, took the North Carolina job, so he is off the market. And when I think about other head coaches, I do think the Bulls are in a pretty good position to like almost take a risk on a coach, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to be tough for the Bulls to find in this next hire, to hire the next head coach who's going to like lead them to championship contention. Like, that's going to be super difficult to do. So instead, I think you would like a coach that could get you from point C to point B. Kind of like your Doug Collins before you fire him to get your Phil Jackson. Right? So I don't necessarily know if you need to like totally knock it out of the park here. With that being said, I think Charlotte found a keeper in Charles Lee, who seems like he could be their long-term head coach for a while. So I'm not opposed to a first-time head coach. And I think that there might be more upside in that. Also more risk that they could be bad. And now maybe it's not as beneficial to be bad if they flatten the lottery odds. So, yeah, there's a lot up in the air, but I'm down with Sam Cassell for sure. Johnny Bryant, he was a Bulls assistant for years, wasn't he? And I was thinking a couple of those other names. I was thinking Chris Quinn was with the Bulls, but he wasn't.
Chris Quinn.
Googled that, and it doesn't appear that he was. But The Athletic had a good article of just like first-time head coaching candidates that they published maybe like a week ago or something, and all those names are on there. So, yeah, I got an open mind for the coaching candidates, and really it's just about the general direction of the team. Like, is the team going to be self-aware? The Bulls have never been self-aware in the last 9 years. They've been consistently delusional. So,
yeah.
We did get a comment bringing up something I was going to bring up. I put him last on my list between the 6 coaches, but John Shire, I've seen rumors, I don't think from anyone like dependable, but there have been rumors, obviously being a local guy. He has a great history. He's done a great job with Duke in a limited amount of time with what he has there. What would you guys think of Shire getting an opportunity in Chicago? Obviously, it's tough to project how that college to NBA jump goes. Not everyone is going to be the next Brad Stevens, despite it seeming that way. But I do think Jon Scheyer connects with young players well. I do think with the Bulls having 2 top 20 draft picks in a great class, he would be an interesting look. And then obviously there's no way of knowing, but if the Bulls were to get Cam Boozer, it would obviously be extremely interesting to have a sort of duo where you're bringing in Scheyer and his top player from his last successful year. But just in general, if the Bulls were to go to a college coach and try to bring in Scheyer, I was curious how you guys think that would work out or what that would look like.
I mean, anything is possible at this point. I mean, like there's a lot of, if you look at the way the college game is played compared to the professional game, there is some overlap that's there that didn't exist, certainly in Billy Donovan's day, as far as, pre-NIL and, certain analytics that are now being woven into the college game that kind of mirrors the professional game to a certain degree. But I do think that, Jon Scheyer, he has a way of developing talent. I mean, you mentioned Cam Boozer, who's going to be a top draft pick. He's a very defensive-oriented coach. He mirrors Billy Donovan in the sense that, he's very adaptable to the way the game is played. So you need some versatility, and versatility goes a long way in the NBA, as we know, both on the floor as well as, on the sidelines when it comes to coaching. So, I mean, I can see it, happening from that standpoint. And, he could relate to the players a little bit more than coaches of an older generation. So there's a closing of the gap from a generational standpoint that can fit nicely with a young Bulls roster. But then again, there are the trade-offs and the flip side of it, which is, he doesn't have any NBA experience. And, even though the game has changed from a college standpoint, it's not the NBA still. The stakes are much higher, the talent is greater, and so forth. He would be leaving. Another trade-off is that he would be leaving Duke to go coach a rebuilding Bulls team. Even though the Bulls are a marquee franchise, he's leaving a storied program in Duke that is well paid, very high profile, has a lot of prestige to it. I mean, so many guys can hold the title of being coach of the Duke Blue Devils and follow in the footsteps of Mike Krzyzewski, right? So, and this is a guy who played under Mike Krzyzewski too. So I think there's a trade-off in that regard. But do I see it? But again, could I see it happening? Yeah, I could see it happening. It's not going to be success right away. As Ricky said earlier, you got to get a coach that's going to be willing to start from scratch and appreciate the process of starting from scratch. But I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I think Duke is a better job than the Bulls. I do, and that sucks to say. But, like, Duke is the flagship Nike school. Like, they're going to have all the Nike money behind them to get whoever they want to get. So, yeah, like, I wanted the Bulls to draft Patrick Gungba, and Patrick Gungba's coming back to Duke. So, yeah, I can't see Scheyer. I don't know. There was a pretty good college coach this year who just won an NCAA tournament game with his school for the first time in program history, and they made the Sweet 16. They almost made the Elite Eight. What if the Bulls hired Fred Hoiberg, a pace and space coach, to lead them into the next era?
Oh God, Freddie.
No, I'm just.
Oh man.
But I don't know. Like,
I will say, Fred Hoiberg and Josh Giddey would be absolute cinema. So you might be cooking there. I don't know.
How do you feel about Dan Hurley, Ricky? I know you were covering it.
Dan Hurley, yeah. I asked him some questions at the Final Four. I got a soft spot for Hurley. Hurley turned down $70 million to coach the Lakers when they had LeBron and Anthony Davis, and he is not going to be sitting through a long rebuild for the Bulls. So I would say, like, Bulls fans, adjust your expectations, because this is probably, you got to lose a little bit more before you're going to win. So I think the Bulls are not going to have a quick turnaround here. If they try to have a quick turnaround, they're almost certainly doomed to fail. Like, that's not going to work if they try to do a quick turnaround. So, like, something like Hurley, like, he's probably not going to leave. Like, UConn's making great moves in the portal. They're situated to be a national championship contender again. Like, I just can't see that happening.
Yeah.
So, like, even like, I would be kind of surprised almost if Todd Golden took the Warriors job, which is crazy to think. But, we'll see how that one plays out. Kevin O'Connor reported that the Warriors have some interest in the Florida coach, Todd Golden. So, I don't know, but I'd be open to a college coach. I don't know what college coach it would be off the top of my head. I can say with confidence it will not be Dan Hurley. And I would be shocked if it's Shire. Maybe Shire will be the Bulls head coach one day. Not going to happen right now, I don't think. So, yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if Golden took that Golden State job, no pun or whatever that just was intended, because I think the allure of coaching Steph Curry in pretty much his like final years is kind of interesting from a coaching standpoint. And then once Steph Curry retires, you kind of have like the greatest sort of buffer period of all time where the fans aren't going to blame you for anything when the Warriors are absolutely terrible post Steph Curry retirement. So you do have an interesting sort of opportunity to sort of lead the Warriors into their next post Steph Curry era. So I could see that being intriguing to a guy like Golden, especially once you've won the title already, where maybe he feels like he accomplished all he could at Florida. But something I did want to sort of bring up is that I did like that Ricky said it's not going to be a quick rebuild. A lot of fans don't understand this probably is the start of a long rebuild, just because the Bulls have kind of false started on their rebuild so many times, so to speak. I do think the quickest they could do it is a 2-year rebuild and not an actual rebuild. I could see the Bulls absolutely knocking the draft out of the park this year, getting a pretty good 2027 pick, and then maybe they're a feisty play-in team, in 2028. But the more realistic thing is this will be 4 or 5 years of them stacking assets and sort of figuring things out. So someone brought up earlier, I think it was in the Discord today, about hiring a head coach and sort of front office from the same team, as we sort of discussed today a little bit already. I do think there's a lot of possibilities there with a guy like Ricky mentioned, with getting Mike Inori and maybe Matt Lloyd. I don't think Mike Zarin would ever leave the Celtics, but again, bringing someone like him in with Cassell would be interesting. And then just because we didn't mention them at all, I like Sean Sweeney a lot. I wrote about him a lot. He's the associate head coach of the Spurs, has some success with the Dallas Mavericks when they made the finals. I think he would be interesting. And I know the Spurs have a front office member, Dave Tellep, who was mentioned in Sham's notification as sort of someone who's on the Bulls' radar. So there's a lot of sort of 2-3-man duos, that the Bulls could sort of go with that I think would at least have everyone on the same page, which is I think was the main issue with the Billy AK partnership there. They always spoke about sort of being on the same page, but I don't think they ever were. And Billy Donovan's Derek Queen comments that always seemed kind of cryptic to me, they always sort of stood out as seeming like maybe everyone wasn't quite in agreement. It was just a lot of nodding and maybe a lot of yes men at the time. So I do want to say, as we get closer to the draft here, whoever the Bulls bring in, head coach, front office, they're all going to have to be on the same page about sort of how they develop this next great Bulls team. At 9 and 15, assuming the Bulls don't get lucky, because that's usually what happens around these parts. I did just want to ask you guys if there are any prospects that you're eyeing for the Bulls that you really would think help turn things around, or the type of guys they should be looking at. This is an interesting draft class in the sense that Bulls are looking for a big man, not a lot of great big men. The Bulls need to probably go younger. There's a couple interesting prospects who are older. So I do want to know if the Bulls were to stay at 9 and 15, curious what you guys would like them to do and sort of where your head's at as they head into the draft lottery.
Honestly, you to your point, Michael, there's not really a whole lot of great big men out there, but I think the biggest thing that they need to do is get those guys that are very versatile, who can score, who can rebound, who can push the tempo, who do have a little bit of size and depth to them. And can play defense as well. So defense really has to be their bread and butter when it comes to who they choose to draft. And, they got plenty of guys that can score already. They got plenty of guys who are athletic. They got guys who can shoot the three. There are guys that can do all those sorts of things from an offensive standpoint, but you also need a guy who can complement that on the defensive side of the thing, or on the defensive side of the ball, excuse me. So I would be surprised if they were to pick, say a Caleb Wilson out of North Carolina, who's 7 foot, he has a very broad wingspan, who can play defense, who's pretty quick for a big man of his size. maybe Nate Ament from Tennessee, somebody like that who's projected to be the 15th pick, who can provide a lot of length and size and can space the floor as well, which complements, guys like Modest and Giddey and so forth. So I think the potential is out there. I mean, it may not be the most ideal draft pick that they would like, just in terms of what they actually need. But, with the right coach and with the right front office who are on the same page and on the same accord when it comes to developing young talent and meeting them where they're at, anything's possible from that regard. So I think from a draft standpoint, you go after guys like that who bring a little bit of depth, a little bit of size, a little bit of length, and who can match that with a certain element of quickness and versatility. And then again, it just goes back to who's at the top.
Nice. Ricky?
God, Caleb Wilson would be awesome, but he's going no later than the 4th pick. So, I mean, I'm tempted to put Caleb Wilson at number 2 in this draft.
Yes.
Behind my boy Cam Boozer.
Yes.
I'm a Boozer guy, so we'll see how that works out. But it would be sick if the Bulls could jump up into the top 4 because you would be guaranteed of landing a really good prospect. If not, you're going to have more good players on the board at number 9 and number 15. Covering the Final Four, I was around Michigan for the Big Ten tournament, for the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, then for the Final Four in the National Championship. I got hooked by Adai Mara, who I was talking to throughout that run, and he's 7'3" with a 7'7" wingspan. I think that, similar to the way Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan rose up the draft boards after their 2024 National Championship game, Adai Mara is going to be set to do something similar. He is a really special passer for somebody that size. His ability to throw outlets and hit-ahead passes was like the best show in college basketball this year. And while he's not going to have a lot of coverage versatility because he's a little bit lumbering as a big man, I think drop coverage is still an effective form of coverage. And especially if you put some good defensive guards in front of him, Adai Mara should be able to protect the rim real well. On offense, he has some post moves and some touch in close to be able to score. His passing ability is really special, like I said, and I think that gives him more offensive utility. Really bad free throw shooter, not a three-point shooter. Those two things scare me. But when's the last time the Bulls have had just a giant center? And I think Adai Mara is that guy. I don't know if he's going to make it to 15 after how well he played in this March Madness run. So I would be tabbing Adai Mara as my personal front runner for the Bulls at number 9. Then at 15, you got a bunch of good options. Deep guard class. I hope they don't draft Nate Ament. I think Nate Ament sucks. That's just my 2 cents. He's like so thin and so far away. And he just seems like the type of player that Arturis would love. Like a toolsy, tall, skinny wing who can't actually play basketball. Now, of course, Nate Ament might be really good 5 years from now. If he turns into a Jaden McDaniels type of player, delete the footage of me saying this. But I think that's possible for sure. I just think, he's going to be a little bit further away. And, hey, the Bulls are far away. So maybe now I'm talking myself into Nate Ament if he was to make it to 15. But, yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting guys. A couple guys I like. Jaden Quaintance out of Kentucky. Barely played this year at Kentucky, but when he was at Arizona State 2 seasons ago as a 17-year-old freshman, looked like the second coming of Bam Adebayo, a total freak defender, long arms, strong chest, great mobility. Can't really do much offensively, and this year Kentucky was a complete wash for him. So that would require a leap of faith to take Jaden Quaintance, but I expected him to be a top 5 pick coming into the year. I think he rushed himself back from a torn ACL, and I don't really want to make any evaluations of him based off the 3 or 4 games he played at Kentucky while injured this year. I think he could be a good pick. Any of these guards, there's a lot of good guards available. Yeah. How about Ibuka Okori out of Stanford, who
that's a new name for me.
Top 100 as a recruit coming into the year, and was just an absolute demon with the ball in his hands. Just a walking paint touch, blazing speed, tight handle. He's got a floater, super duper productive. I think that if he stays in the draft process, Okori would be a pretty interesting selection at number 15 overall. This guy's a little bit older, so it may deter the Bulls from taking him. But one of my favorite players in this class, Iowa point guard Bennett Sturtz, I think he would be a good pick at number 15. Reminds me a little bit of Ty Jerome, who always grades out as one of the best players, role players in the league in the analytics. just a nasty shooter, and the ball just goes in when Bannister shoots it. I just think he's a very additive player, very good in the pick and roll. In Iowa, he played at a very slow pace, so I'm excited to see what he looks like in a faster-paced NBA system. So that's another guy I would name. I mean, I could do this all day. Dalen Swain out of Texas, a junior wing. I really like Dalen Swain. He was basically someone who was like a defensive wing stopper his first 2 years at Xavier. Transfers to Texas following his head coach, Sean Miller, and he really started to develop as an offensive player. Really good driver, scorer. Scoring ability he showed this year. Jump shot, definitely a question mark. But I just like that he's going to be a good wing defender, with the length and the athleticism that you're ideally looking for. So I think that would be another good name. What if we just reunite the Michigan front court and draft Merez Johnson next to Adai Mara? Those two guys work well together. Merez is, to me, the best defensive prospect in the class. The guy is an absolute buzzsaw. Reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew on the Pistons. Just a jacked man who can defend all over the court. And like Beef Stew, he's starting to stretch out his shooting range a little bit. I saw, Merez a bunch of times this year. I probably saw him live 5-6 times, just covering Michigan throughout the tournament. And I also saw him at Northwestern. And I think he's going to shoot it eventually. Not, he's a little short for a big, but what if he's your 4? Immediately adding toughness, length, with him and Mara, that'd be pretty dope. So, those are a few guys off the top of my head. I'm bummed that Gungba is going back to school. I'd give a shout to Chris Senak out of Houston. I do think he's pretty far away, but he actually reminds me quite a bit of Jalen Smith on the Bulls, where he's like sort of a space cadet big man who can rip shots and like has really good length and good tools if you could actually get him to improve his feel for the game. And that should come with more experience as it is. LeBaron Philon at 15, that could be cool. And I've been banging the drum for Mikel Brown out of Louisville.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I was waiting for it.
You'd have to take him at 9. And then I'd be scared about worrying or missing out on Mara. There's a couple things I'm worried about with Mikel Brown. He's old for a freshman, so he's basically the age of a sophomore. Like he's older than Jeremiah Fears, for example, who was in last year's draft as a one and done. He's pretty skinny, and I don't know if he's going to be a defensive player. But what I like about him is that his shot profile is really good. He rips pull-up threes, which I think is a valuable skill. Maybe if the Bulls were to draft him, they could go all in on offensive rebounding, and someone could try to get the O board on all these missed threes Mikel Brown's going to be putting up. But he's going to make some of them too.
Yeah.
And I think that is a valid strategy in current NBA team building. Chucking threes, hey, they could go in. You could get the offensive rebound. It's not a live ball turnover. So, those are 3 good outcomes for chucking threes. I really like his creativity and his passing vision, too. He just sees passes and angles that, truly not many players would see. So, I mess with Mikel Brown for sure. If they could get Mikel Brown and Mara at 9 and 15, to me, that'd be a dream scenario. I think Mara and Brown both definitely have bust potential, but guess what, guys? There are no perfect players. Even Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic have pretty serious flaws in their game, despite being, 2 of the best players in the league. Steph Curry had flaws in his game, despite being one of the 10 greatest players ever and better than Kobe Bryant. I had to throw that one in there. So I don't know. It's just a lot of these guys. It's gonna come down to a few swing factors in terms of will their strengths become so good that they overcome their potential weaknesses. But I do know one thing for sure, and that's that there will be very good players chosen at or after the number 9 and number 15 picks in this draft. There's definitely good players in this class. Whoever the Bulls hire has to be a very good talent evaluator immediately, because for the Bulls to have some hope, they got to hit these picks.
Absolutely, Ricky.
I got to bounce.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on today, man. Everyone who's in here, they know who you are, but if you just want to tell people where they can find you. And
you can find all my work at SB Nation. You can listen to my Bulls podcast at Cash Considerations. And that's it.
Absolutely,
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for your time today, Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks, Ricky.
Man, I mean, I know that made you happy to hear, Walton. He started spitting about Mikel Brown there, man. Like I said, you put me onto him. And I remember I kept hearing you bring him up in the Discord. And one day I looked him up. He's honestly, dude, the highlights that kid has, one of my favorite prospects. It's just something about his game, dude.
Yeah, As Ricky said, there are no perfect prospects, but when you're evaluating guys, I think what you're just looking for, at least for me, is highest ceiling, who has the potential to be a star. And when I'm looking at that, it's who's taking on a high usage rate, who's doing a lot for their team. And Brown, in terms of the guys that you don't think about, sort of the elite guys, the top four, he had a massive usage rate. He was really doing a lot for Louisville. He was turning the ball over a little bit, throwing it all over the court, but it's because the kid's a balls to the wall type player. He's sort of always going 100 miles an hour. His three-point attempt rate is something I bring up so much because he's not afraid to let it fly from three, as Ricky brought up. He's just someone who, with the way he puts pressure on the rim and then can aggressively get up threes from the outside, it's pretty easy to see the translation, how if everything hits, he really could be a difference maker at the NBA level. And someone brought up taking Ade Mara versus Mikel Brown at 9, how you would view that. And, Ricky's out of here. I was glad to hear someone who loved Mara and loved him so much that Ricky seemed to have no problem taking him at 9 overall. It still would be a little too rich for my blood, just because I think if he's not going to be versatile defensively, the level of offense you need for him to be a starting center in the NBA, I do think is kind of interesting, where I'm not sure if I saw that at Michigan because they had so many good players around him. So I think if my choice is Ade Mara or somebody like Brown or even someone like Acuff, who I really think is going to have a lot of struggles defensively. If one of those more talented offensive guards slip to 9, I think I'd rather take a chance on one of those archetypes rather than Mara. Because, again, if Mara's there at 15, it's like a slam dunk. If he's there at 9 and you take him, I think it's a little bit different of a calculation if you get a bust with that draft pick.
Well, you certainly feel a lot more comfortable with him being at the 9 than you do at the 15, just from that standpoint alone. And the only thing is that, as you said, when it comes to Brown, yeah, he does have a tendency to turn the ball over. And if we're going to be honest, he kind of is somewhat of, very similar to both Modest and Giddey in that regard, who are very balls to the wall type of players. Certainly Modest is, but they do have a tendency to turn the ball over too frequently, and that ultimately derails the offense. So, he complements them in that regard, but then also when he's good, he's really, really good. So the 9, if he or any of those other guys are at the 9, you have a better chance with them than you do at the 15. So, but again, the versatility does go a long way. So as I said earlier, you need a guy who can play defense. You need to have a guy who has a lot of strength, has a lot of length to him, and is also quick getting up and down the floor, can spread the floor, can shoot, and can shoot from all spots on the floor as well. As Ricky was right, there is no perfect draft pick, but there's a lot of potential, and that's what makes this draft class in particular so unique. I mean, keep in mind, in the Final Four, there were 10 draft prospects in the Final Four alone. There's plenty of fish in the sea.
Absolutely. Mike, did you have anything else for Zach here?
Yeah. Just before we get out of here, I did want to bring a little dose of negativity because that's what people expect from a Bulls content. So
it's like 80%. It's 80% negative, 20% positive. We covered the 20% positive.
We did, man.
Yeah, we got to cover because Ricky didn't do too much negative, and that's what people sometimes expect from Ricky when he comes on stuff. So I'll cover for him here. Just in terms of the head coaching vacancy, the front office vacancies, and I'm not even trying to be funny. Just and if there's no answer for this, it's fine. But I was thinking the other day, like, man, the Bulls pretty much have a great opportunity. I think I was talking to my dad about it. It's pretty much like have fans happy. Like, if you do a great job with these hires, everything looks good before any moves are made, the Bulls are on the right track, and you can say they made the right moves. Is there anything in your mind that would qualify as a bad hire, whether it be the front office or the head coaching vacancy? I was just interested because that was something I've been talking to people about. Is there any move where the Bulls make the hire and then you go, oh no, same old Bulls? Or you're like, I'm not sure how this could work out. Because as of right now, it seems like almost any move the Bulls make in terms of the hire is going to be received positively from some section of the fan base. So I was just curious if there's anything you think would have the opposite reaction.
I honestly can't think of anybody off the top of my head. I guess if they were exact clones of Arturis and Billy Donovan, or at least, Billy Donovan, of the last 6 years or so. Not Billy Donovan in his totality, Michael. I know you're a big Billy Donovan fan, so we're not talking about everything that he brings to the table. He's a Hall of Fame coach, and rightfully so. But honestly, I think the Bulls, they just got to be very strategic. They got to be intentional. They got to be, Doc Rivers. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Doc Rivers, he had his chance. He does bring a lot to the table as far as getting to know the players, and he has a great understanding of the game, being a former player and whatnot. I don't know, but you gotta look at guys who have a background in development. You gotta bring guys in that can relate to the players. Maybe bring in somebody a little bit younger. We mentioned John Shire. I mean, that's kind of out of left field, but somebody who's a little bit younger. I mean, Johnny Bryant, who I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's a guy who's in his 40s. He's somebody that you could consider, someone who could relate to the players, someone who comes in with a mentality of wanting to build for the long haul rather than settle in the short term. And I think you got to bring in a coach, you got to bring a GM who has that kind of mentality, who knows what they're working with, who can garner those assets, who can aggressively pursue the free agent market and isn't afraid to pursue the free agent market and snatch up those players and spend the money. Because they got money to spend, so they're ready to spend it. So they got to bring in those guys who are willing to spend the money, hopefully. And if they get somebody if they get somebody who fits that background, who brings all those tangibles, I doubt that the fans will be disappointed. They'll only be disappointed if it turns out to be the same old. But for now, I think Bulls fans are just willing to give whoever a chance and see how it goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I would agree, and I don't think, same as you said, Zach, I don't think there's any name that I would necessarily say bad hire or anything, especially when it comes to that front office role. Matt Lloyd, the reason I like him is he has a past history with the Bulls, which is a reason I would kind of hate somebody being considered for a Bulls job. But when you're talking about the front office, I think having that familiarity is important. I did want to mention, I know Joe Cowley would hate to hear this, but I do hate the idea absolutely of Tom Thibodeau coming back and being the head coach in Chicago. I think Tibbs is an excellent coach. What he can bring to a team. He's going to raise the floor defensively. But I think my main issue with the Bulls, more so when I was a kid growing up than now covering the team, but it's like they're a nostalgia factory. They rely on nostalgia, sort of get fans into the building, sometimes even get seems like players to sign with the team. It's all about the nostalgia, the yesteryear, what they did to become a great franchise, not what they're doing in the moment. And if you hire Tom Thibodeau, even if it's because they honestly think he would do a good job this time, it just feels like they're hiring Tom Thibodeau because, of course, there's going to be a ton of Bulls fans who are super happy bringing Tibbs back. It feels like a move where it's like there's a lot of season ticket holders who will be excited that Tom Thibodeau's back in the building. And that's – I don't want them thinking like that. I feel like hiring Arturas Karnisovas was them going outside of the box. And it did burn them, but I don't think they should be afraid of thinking outside of the box because of that. So I think it's okay to go young. It's okay to go with the first-time head coach. I don't think they need to sort of rely on nostalgia there. But, yeah, I'm with you, Zach. Pretty much whatever direction they go in, I think fans will be happy, and they'll be able to go in a sort of good – they're in a good spot here.
Well, to your point, I mean, yes, Thibodeau was a great coach, and yes, he got them to the playoffs a couple of times, and yes, he coached Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah and Jimmy Butler and all those guys. But they also had a core that was able to get them to the playoffs. They had talent that was in place that enabled them to get them to the playoffs in 2011 and 2015. And so, yeah, it's easy to look back at, years past and attach, a Tom Thibodeau to that, or even a Steve Kerr and say, oh, they've had success before. They can duplicate that success again, just bring them on. And it's a different dynamic that they're dealing with. And if we know anything about a guy like Tom Thibodeau is that, and I can also factor in Dan Hurley, even though, Dan Hurley was mentioned earlier, they're the type of coaches who don't have patience. They expect to win. They don't like having a bad product on the court. They are not used to that, especially Dan Hurley. He's not used to losing. He's not used to rebuilding. There's a reason why he sticks around at UConn. There's a reason why he didn't want to go to the Lakers, even though his name was floated around as potentially a coach, as potentially taking over for the Lakers and coaching LeBron and everybody else. Is he doesn't have that kind of patience. And also, if he were to go to the Lakers, he wouldn't be running anything. It'd be LeBron and Luka running the show, and he wouldn't have a say. He'd be overshadowed by them. So, there's no reason for him to go or leave UConn, because they're going to be national championship contenders again. And they're not patient coaches. Neither is Thibodeau. And frankly, neither is Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is not the type of player or not the type of coach who's going to slog it out for 2, 3, 4 years of rebuilding and then just wait for it all to come together. They're going to expect it to come together right here and right now. So you got to have a coach that comes in with all those essentials, but who brings a certain amount of patience that is greatly needed. Same is true with the GM. You got to have patience.
You're spitting, Zach. Yeah, every time I hear Steve Kerr's name get mentioned, I just start thinking of Jonathan Kuminga, because, man, like I really wanted Kuminga to be a guy that we could have at least looked at, but just, to your point, like his coaching style, like if a guy like that can't get minutes, that doesn't bode well for us having, young up-and-coming players on this team if you were to be a coach. So, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly there.
And Steve Kerr being mentioned at all is kind of just goes back to why I love Bulls fans so much. Like, I tell people I'm not a Bulls fan, and I'm not like trying to be like a jackass. I just mean like I'm writing about the team. I don't look at it as a fan anymore. I can't. I'm just always kind of thinking big picture. But the reason I love Bulls fans is Steve Kerr, a Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame player, guy who's coached Steph Curry, had some of the greatest teams in NBA history, won a ton of championships. And Chicago was so proud, such a sports-driven city. They're like, maybe he will consider coming to coach Josh Giddey, Matas Buzelis, and sort of rebuilding the Bulls. And that's I think the Bulls are one of the best openings right now in the league, maybe the best in terms of these. But I just mean Steve Kerr, with all due respect, he like Zach said, he's probably going towards retirement. He's probably done with everything. Yeah. But I do love the Bulls fans are so passionate. They're like, well, obviously Chicago is going to be at the top of everyone's list. That's the Chicago Bulls. So it's a city that's so starved for a winner. If you're the head coach and front office that comes here and actually has any sort of modicum of success, they might build a statue for you outside the United Center. So I really do think it's a great opening. I think they're going to nail these hirings. I really do, mostly because I do trust the outside voice in the search firm having an opinion. And I really respect Michael Reinsdorf for being transparent about that, even though I know he caught a lot of flack from present company included, talking about myself for some of the things he said during that presser. But again, everything seems to point on they understood in some fashion things went very wrong under AK with Billy as the head coach, and they want to try to right the ship. Whether or not they do that is up to them, but you're in Chicago and they have all the money and resources to be able to get things on track. So with 2 top 20 draft picks in a great class and a lot of openings, I'm as optimistic as I've been about the Bulls in honestly a very, very long time.
They should be. And also they should be because nothing's happened yet. So we're kind of living in this moment where we can think and conceptualize all the possibilities, or Bulls fans can certainly think and conceptualize of the possibilities of who can be brought on as the head coach, who's going to be the GM, who those 9 and 15 draft picks are going to be. And it's easy to fantasize about that and just think optimistically about that because it hasn't happened yet. So, if anything, it's something to savor for the here and now before it gets down to brass tacks here, which will be in a few weeks. So, and as I said before, and I said it in my editorial earlier today, because whatever happens from this point on, the Bulls may get, a top-notch coach, they get a good GM, and they get some high draft picks, and then who knows, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, they'll go from contending for the play-in game to playing in the play-in game to winning the play-in game, maybe getting back to the playoffs, and then it's up from there. And then we'll look back at this time and say, thank you, Billy Donovan. Thank you, Billy Donovan, for doing the right thing and stepping away. If anything, Billy Donovan, he's been driving the bus for 6 years, and he realized his time was done. He gave the keys back and he said, thank you. He didn't flatten the tires of the guy who comes next. So I think, whatever happens from this point on, it's going to be traced back to Billy Donovan leading, and then we'll deal with the consequences of it, good or bad. but it's up from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that leads me to another one of my stupid favorite catchphrases about the Bulls. It's all fun and games until they do something. So for right now, I am having a ton of fun because they haven't done anything yet. So yeah, I'm feeling good, man, and I think Bulls fans should too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Hey, thank you so much for your time, Zach. We'll have to have you back on at some point during the summer. But just like Ricky, do you want to tell everybody where they can reach you at or find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Clutch Points. There's my X handle at Draves Zachary. You can follow me there. On May 10th, I should be able to. I'm still waiting for approval, but if all goes well, I'll be covering the draft lottery in Chicago.
Let's go,
on May 10th.
baby.
So
let's go, Zach. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. It should be exciting, and
Let's go, man.
I mean, heck, if the Mavericks can luck out and get the #1 pick in Cooper Flagg, and he is bound to be Rookie of the Year, anything's possible.
Absolutely. That's some good news, man. I think you will get that. Mike, any closing statements for the people out there today?
Yeah, just wanted to say, as always, that everyone knows, as I put up here very obnoxiously, you can follow me on Twitter at ZenMasterMike, where I will run my mouth about the Bulls, probably tweet out some random music that I am listening to at the time, and generally
good music.
Generally respond to you at any hour of the day if I'm just running my mouth on there. So always feel free to talk some hoops. Right now, I think what I have pinned up there, if you follow me on Twitter at ZenMasterMike, I did, like I said, a story on 6 candidates to look at for head coach for the Chicago Bulls. Again, that's on Bulls Roundtable. Shout out to Gavin Dorsey, who does a great job with the team, and my guy Kevin Liu, who has some great work over there. But in the article about the 6 head coaching candidates, I talk about a lot of the guys that I talked about today: Sam Cassell, Kevin Sweeney. I also talk about Wes Unseld Jr., who has a very strong chance of just being sort of the built-in head coach. So someone asked the picture behind me. I believe that is Anthony Hopkins from The Road to Wellville. I have a lot of friends who are really big into movies, film critic type people, and I honestly don't even know Road to Wellville. I know who Anthony Hopkins is, but yeah, it's really funny. That picture is placed right behind my head every podcast, and I never think about it. So shout out to Abe.
Very triumphant, man. He must have heard about the Bulls news.
I'm sure our guy Kurtz, who I think has seen every movie imaginable, despite being a very young dude, will know exactly what that movie is. So I'm going to ask him about that later on today. But Zach, really appreciate you coming on today, man. Hope we can have you back on maybe after the draft lottery or after the Bulls do something, which is a scary thought, but we will have a lot of great things to talk about. So thanks again, man, for hopping on.
Thank you guys for having me. Great to chat with you, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you so much, Zach. God bless, man. Thank you. All right, Chicago. Well, we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming in tonight. Much love.
Peace.